Good morning, everybody. It's Peter here from AJS and also representing our sister company in New Zealand, G&A Warburtons. And today we're once again taking you into a jeweller's workshop somewhere in Australasia. And this week we're heading to sunny Adelaide and the even sunnier Katherine Grocott. Welcome, Katherine.
Good morning, Peter, and good morning to everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Great to have you back on board, Katherine. And the title of today's workshop is An Introduction to Sewing. Would you like to tell us what we're going to get up to today? Or would you like to acknowledge the lands on which we're coming from?
I would. Yes, I'd like to acknowledge that I am living, working and creating on the lands of the Kaurna people and acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging and their continued spiritual connection to the land that is so important. So, introduction to sewing. This is one of our Back to Basics series. So if you joined me last time, we did Introduction to Bench Setup. This is an introduction to sewing. So if you are, big caveat out here, if you are an experienced jeweller, then this is probably something that you already know. You do this every day, day in, day out. You know you're sewing. But if you are a person who's new to jewellery, or you've just started, or you're having trouble with accuracy, or your blades breaking, then maybe this is the kind of little introduction that will be helpful for you. So a few things that we need if we're going to be doing some sewing. Of course, you'll need one of these, a saw frame. So this is the most important thing, along with your blades. So if you see, get those.
I'll just get that for you.
Yeah, saw blades. And there's different types of saw blades. So I'll be talking about those in a little while. Different types of saw blades. You also need the metal that you're going to be, working with. So I've got some, scrap aluminium copper for today that we can play with. You need your bench peg, and the more secure this is, the easier it is to saw. Now, I've got one that is interchangeable, but it is actually beneficial for sawing to have something that's much more stable and it isn't going to move around. You'll also need a way of, what you're going to be cutting out, what you're going to be sawing out. So some kind of pattern or the picture or the design that you're wanting. So yeah, I've got a design here for something that I'm working on that I've already sawn out previously, for a friend, pair of earrings that have been commissioned. And so to do that, you also need, some kind of glue and scissors to cut that out, ready for you applying. Your alternative is Sharpies and a scribe, and I'll show you how they can work as well. And depending on what you're going to be cutting out, you might need a drill bit and a micro motor, or even a hand drill, but something that might put a hole in it so you can cut from the inside of a design. Alrighty. Oh, and lubricant. So if you are, again, sawing, have some lubricant on hand. Alrighty, so for something I made earlier, let's make sure that all gets in frame.
Frame being the operative word.
That's right, let's frame this properly. Let's get that out of the road. Make sure that, there we go. This is a saw frame. And it's helpful to know some of the parts of a saw frame so that when I say things, you know what I'm talking about. So whole thing, a frame. You've got your handle down the base, the frame around the outside. This back part here is sometimes called the spine. This part here, this blade length adjustment, this means that you can move the handle, forwards or backwards so that you get it the right length for your blades. Now, most of the blades that I've worked with, I think all of them that I've worked with, have been a standard length. So once I've set that in place, I can leave it and be done with it. And then you've got these two little things. These are the two screws, and inside the mechanism are little pads. So you can just see the kind of slightly darker, blacker pads, which then pinches the blade onto the kind of firm, unmoving side of the frame. And this part here is the throat. So the blade length adjustment can adjust that throat. I have heard of jewelers who, have, broken a brand new blade, and they just change their saw frame, their throat length, and they use the little bit that's left over because it's still a brand new blade. Of course, that's possible. But yeah, we're going to work with it just set on its kind of normal setting. The other thing is that you can have different size saw frames. So as you can see here, this one has got a narrower width. So if you're only working in very small metals, this works. Yeah, it's lighter, it's easier to handle. But you can also, and this is just for pure historical, isn't that beautiful?
Wow, so how old's that one?
I actually have no idea. It was given to me as a farewell gift. And yeah, it's just beautiful. It's, I believe it's German. But yeah, I just, the workmanship and the lovely kind of features on it. It's lovely. Mm. But I must admit, this is the one I use the most. Now, if I was advising people on buying a saw frame, I would kind of go, the saw frame itself is probably not the thing that is, you don't have to invest your top dollar on your saw frame. What you do need to invest in is good saw blades. Cheap saw blades, you're going to, go through them very, very quickly. But like this is from memory, it was kind of a student or a basic introductory frame that I got 20 plus odd years ago, and it has worked beautifully that whole time. There are, however, some amazing, top end saw frames, kind of especially made out of aircraft grade aluminium and stuff like that, that people swear by. They are super lightweight, which means you can saw for longer. And yeah, the balance of them apparently is fantastic. So if you're somebody who's doing a lot of sawing, and that's, kind of your main bread and butter, then absolutely check out some of those, higher brand, yeah, like New Concepts, and yeah, they have a good one. And there's Pepe Tools have yeah, one as well. So, but I've found that, yeah, basic one for me works fine, but invest in your saw blades. So saw blades, there are a few different types of saw blades. So you have your normal blades, and they come in like little batches of, yeah, a dozen. Now, because they're so tiny, you're never going to see this on screen. So let's get out the texter. So on a normal saw blade, you've got the back of the blade, which is nice and flat, and you've got teeth on the other side. So they go out and in, out and in. So the teeth are kind of one directional. So it means when you're cutting, they cut best on the downstroke. There are skip tooth blades, and they are a little bit different. And again, you probably can't see that because that's not going to focus under a camera. Skip tooth blades are almost self-explanatory. They skip a tooth. So you've got, the back of the blade, a tooth, and then a gap, a tooth, and then gap, tooth, gap, tooth, gap.
So what does that achieve?
This is material choice. This blade here, absolutely fantastic for all your metals. That'll get through your aluminiums, your coppers, your silvers, your golds, etc. This is great for acrylics and plastics. Because they're kind of easier to cut through, and just the construction of the material, they end up with kind of large swathes of kind of off-cutter material. So if you use one of these, absolutely, it will cut through, but it's going to clog up so much quicker. With this, it's got nowhere to clog up, so you can keep sawing for longer periods of time without having to kind of clear out your your blade. Now the third one are spiral blades. Now, you can kind of see them a little bit in here, that there seems to be blades like all around, and that's exactly the case. And again, a different.
How are you going to draw this one, Katherine?
I know. I've been thinking about this. I'm hoping that what's in my head is going to turn out on paper. So on a spiral blade, you've actually got a round blade, but then you've got, and let's hope this works. You've got a tooth here, a tooth here, a tooth here, a tooth here, and a tooth here. And then you're going around the corner. So there'll be another tooth here. And on the back of the blade, you'll have a tooth there, a little tooth there, and then you're back to the beginning of a tooth over on the side. So
I reckon you nailed it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So the teeth are actually spiraling as they're spiral blades. The teeth are spiraling around the blade. So this one is fantastic for wax. Now, if any of you guys have worked with wax, you know that creates a plethora of rubbish as you're cutting. And again, this is great for making sure that you can cut smoothly and easily without your blade getting all messed up and blocked, and you can't go anywhere because it's just so full of material. So there are 3 types of blade: normal blades, skip tooth blades, spiral blades, and they're suitable for different materials. Now, the other thing with with your normal blades, this can get a little bit confusing for people when you're first starting out. So you've got, this is new concepts. Different manufacturers will have saw sizing charts, and these are helpful if you can get a hold of one. These guys, you can get it off their website. But what this does is it shows you their kind of blade sizes and the technical aspects of, the width of it, the depth of the teeth, some of the pitch angles, things like that. But one of the things that's most helpful is this 3-tooth engagement, and then what gauge of material it is best to work with. So if you imagine, if you start with this 0 here, the numbers, if they're just 1, 2, 3, 4 going up in size, you're getting a larger, thicker blade. If you go downwards, this is called like 2-0 or 2-0 or 2-aught or 2-0, depending on where you are in the world, it'll be called a different thing. But 2-0, 3-0, if you're in this direction, the blade is getting smaller. So you're going from 10-0 all the way up to size 16 for this particular brand. So you're going from the absolute smallest all the way to the largest. The one problem that I found is just about all of the ones, these kind of sizing charts that I found, when you get over to these, what material thickness is best, it's in American gauge. So that's really frustrating for all of us who work in millimeters and are in the metric system. So yeah, what I did, I made my own. I stole this off a lady, American lady. So this bottom one is actually hers, but I've interpreted it so that it works for Aussies or anybody who works with metric. So I've changed the thickness to the materials that I work with the most. So 0.5, 0.8, 1.5, etc. And then the blade sizes that I work with the most, and kind of found which one works the best for those material sizes, rather than having to go and find a conversion chart for gauges, which of course, because it's in imperial, will always be in weird inches, and it'll be 1.06 mil or something. I've gone to what's my actual proper mil size. That's what I'm going to be able to purchase in Australia, and I've changed it to the gauges that the size blades that work best. Now, what they're talking about with this 3-tooth engagement is, let's bring this back. When you are sawing, this 3-tooth engagement is a concept about how many teeth are going to be cutting for the thickness of material. So what you want is approximately 3 teeth for the width of your material. So if that's the width of your metal, you want about 3 teeth to cut through. So as you're going up and down, you'll always have at least 1 tooth engaged. If your material was like only this thick, what will end up happening is it'll just keep catching. The blade won't stay nice and in the cut line. It will pop out and catch and grate. And you're likely to, break blades doing that. But if your material was, say, this thick, then that poor blade is having to work so hard to get through that material that it's quite likely that it will heat up, get brittle, break, or it's just going to take you forever to cut through that material. Having said that, you still need to think of what you're trying to achieve. So for example, if you're cutting off a sprue on the back, go big. You're trying to cut through 4 or 5 mil of material, go a huge blade. But you might be working in say 1 mil silver, and a friend of mine cuts out like true to life size ants out of her work. They are so accurate, they look like little ants, and she will use a 80 blade to cut those out, even though the material is probably a little bit thick for that blade. She just goes nice and carefully, nice and smoothly, and she gets that fine detail, which you couldn't get with a blade that followed this rule. So you do have to pick and choose. It's got to work with what you're trying to achieve. But general rule of thumb, about 3 teeth for the thickness of the material. All right. Now, how to set up a saw frame. One of the first things you need to do, actually let's go with this one, is you Oh, I've got a unmute to start speaking thing in front of me, so I can't see myself. There we go. Your blade length determines this length. So what I do is I'll insert this one right up to the top. So you can see that there's this little pad here, there's a gap up there. I'll insert the blade right into the top, and then I can adjust this bit and it can slide up and down so that it will be just a fraction shorter, you know, about 2-3 mil shorter than the blade. And that means I've got a nice, about 1 centimetre area to adjust that tension. So I tighten up the back, got that length. So if I'm putting a new one in, I am making sure that this blade, when I run my finger down, the teeth are going downwards. If I run my finger up gently, it will get caught. So you can see how it's kind of just catching on my skin. I've got to kind of flick it off. That means I know that it's going the right direction. So just down the blade very gently, it'll run down smooth. So I want the teeth down and out. So outwards facing, it's going to face out from my spine, and downwards facing down to the handle. So put it into the top one, and I butt that blade right up against the top of the frame. Make sure the pad is square, tighten up that top screw, and then I'm just making sure that it's vaguely straight, so it's going to be easy to get into that bottom screw and pad. Now, this tensioning method, there's a variety of ways of doing this, but what I find the easiest, because my bench peg for sawing is about 7 to 15 centimetres below my chin, so kind of between chest and chin height. You know, this is about the area that I want my bench peg. That is a great location for being able to put the handle against your sternum, that nice big kind of meaty but bony part. So you can kind of put it there, lean in, and that's kind of slightly distorting the saw frame. Lean in, tighten up the screw with the blade in place, and then as you release it, that's going to create tension on the blade. Now, hopefully you can hear this.
Lovely tune, thank you.
Yeah, you've got it. A nice high-pitched sound. Now, what I've just realised is that because I'm not doing my normal looking at it really closely, I've put that in backwards. So again, check it, because you'll soon find out if you've done it wrong. So I can feel the teeth on the back of that. So let's adjust. So you guys can see it all over again.
So where's the sweet spot then between too loose and too tight then, Katherine?
Yes. Too loose means you're not going to be able to, your blade's going to wobble all over the place. And too tight means that it's going to get brittle and break too easily. So you want a high-pitched ping. Somebody once told me you like middle C. I don't have that perfect pitch, so I have no idea what middle C sounds like. But yeah, that high pitch, or alternatively, that you can push it. You can push it, and it has that little bit of movement, but not a lot. It's kind of resistant to, more than that. So tiny amount of movement. Now, once you've got that in place, before you start cutting, lubricating your blade is really helpful. That will help with nice, smooth cutting. So there are, again, a variety of different lubricants on the market. Even just plain beeswax will work. I've got, Peppy Tools, Peppy Lube, which I find works quite nicely. But yeah, there's a bunch of stuff out on the market. For these kind of solid block ones, I find that lubricating the back of the blade, which gives me, lubricant on both sides, is good, rather than the front of the blade where I can clog up the teeth. So that's where I prefer to put mine. Back of the blade gives me lubrication without blockage. And then you're kind of ready to saw. But what are you going to saw? So you need a pattern or a design, something that you're going to be cutting out. So this is kind of one of the things in terms of if you guys were struggling with accuracy, think about the size of your line. The thinner the line, actually, the more accurate you can be. So imagine if you've got something that's, the same thickness as your blade, that's all you've got to follow. If, however, you've got something that's the thickness of a Sharpie, you've actually got lots of distance where you can actually put your blade. So exaggerated. If this was the actual Sharpie width, imagine that's all coloured in, but this is your saw blade, you can start over on this side. Oh yeah, I'm going close, and oh look, I'm wobbling a bit. Oh dear, oh I can't get back online. Oh, I'm trying to get over here, and your blade is going all over the place. Whereas if your line is nice and narrow and thin, you can follow the line. Kind of, you haven't got as much room to play with. So I do try to find that, in my experience, nice thin lines to follow is helpful. So if I'm going to print out something, on the computer, some people will use Illustrator or things to get their designs. Great. Go for a nice fine line rather than a thick line. Just make sure it's dark enough so that you can actually see. Or I will use a mechanical pencil rather than a Sharpie to draw. Again, if I'm using the pencil, that means I'm usually drawing onto paper and then gluing it onto my piece of metal. Or another great trick is you can, if I do it in this, you'll be able to see. A lot of your trade jewelers, they will mark their metal straight away. They're not making patterns. They're calculating everything straight onto their metal. And as such, they use their calipers, scribes, everything to mark directly onto the metal. So it's absolutely accurate, and you just get a very thin scribe line for accuracy. For those of you who are, hobby jewelers or at the beginning, you may not be interested in that kind of precise location of lots of diamonds or anything. You're just wanting to create patterns. What you can do, if you still want that nice clean line, you can actually draw on your metal, colour that in, then use your scribe to draw your pattern in. Now, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, you can just,
yeah, we got the idea.
Very, very fine line that you can.
Great little tip. Yeah.
So yeah, that's going to be a lot more accurate, and just having that, that little bit of accuracy and preciseness with the scribe, and having the colour means it will kind of stand out. You can also, do things like, use a pair of calipers. If your cut line on the side is nice and straight, you can get a precise straight line going across, or a set square. Have a little have a set square, and then you can line up a piece, colour it in, get your scribe. And mark. So yeah, a variety of ways of making your mark straight onto the metal. But for a lot of us, we're going to be drawing our design onto a piece of paper and sticking it on. There might be other ways of transferring. Maybe I've heard of people using like carbon paper as well, and transferring designs onto metal like that.
Gee, there's a blast from the past, carbon paper.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I keep saving mine from, rent receipt books, because you never know when that might come in handy. So what I've done, maybe our paper out of the way. What I've done is I've got a little drawing here that I can then use to cut out. So I'll grab my scissors. What's that adage of, for jewelers, 5% making, 95% looking for the tool I just put down on my bench. So I've got my pattern. I tend to use just a good old glue stick. For the most part, it does, the job pretty well. But give it good coverage. Glue sticks work well, and it's very easy to get this off, straight under usually it will peel off, but if it's really stuck, you just put it under the tap and it will dilute the glue and you're good to go. I've got a little scrap piece of aluminium here. I'm going to glue that on. And a little hint, if you're trying to, figure out where's the best place for me to put this, hold it up to the light and you can see the paper, frame around it if you're getting, trying to get it to fit exactly. And you can see the shadow of the metal behind. Glue that down. And this particular piece of aluminium, sometimes you'll find this, depending on the materials you work with, it has a piece of plastic on the back. So get rid of that, certainly for this exercise. Right, so we have our saw with a 2-0 blade. We've got some aluminium that's probably about 1.2 mil. Now, let's get into sawing. I've got some different shapes on here. I've got a wavy line, a straight line, some angles, and a shape that I want to cut out the inside of. For starting, I tend to use either my thumbnail or a fingernail to get my starting position. Now, you would have heard me say earlier about the whole, it cuts best on the downstroke. It does cut in both directions. It just cuts a lot more on the downstroke. But that upstroke is helpful to get your very first position. So I get my thumbnail right against the line that I want to cut, and I'll give myself a couple of upstrokes. And what that does is just give me the initial groove for me to start sawing. Then I want to make sure that my fingers are not going to go anywhere near the front of that blade. So I'm securing the piece of work nice and firmly. So fingers well away from the blade, certainly the front of the blade. And I'm also trying to make sure that as much material as possible is touching my bench peg. If I'm, kind of down here or over here, this piece of material is going to flap and move. And again, that's another way of breaking a blade. So nice and secure, where you can kind of press down firmly. When you're holding a saw, it's actually quite a light grip. So yeah, you don't want it, no death grips that doesn't help either. Just a nice gentle, gentle grip. So I've got my little initial cut line. I can then start my larger strokes. So with sawing, you want nice long strokes. You want to use the entire length of the blade, gentle grip, and you're not pushing forward. You're actually kind of letting the blade do the work. The other thing you'll find is, of course, you will have, you know, that kind of little bit of swath or, lemel, the little bits left over from your sawing. That's going to get in the way of your line. So just, you know, brushing that out of the way with your finger or just blowing out is helpful. So I'm doing the curved line first. The curved line, you actually move the metal or the material rather than the blade. So, and this is about the speed you want to go. You don't need to go super fast. But as you can see, the blade, the saw stays in the same position. And the metal is what I turn. So long strokes. Now you can also hear that it's just a gentle sawing sound. There's no, high-pitched squeal. If you hear that, you know something's wrong, and usually it's the metal isn't secure, or you're pressing far too hard. Now, if you find that sometimes if you're working on a really big piece of metal, your spine is going to hit and you can't maneuver your piece. So you actually have to back out and come in again from another point. So if that happens, you actually do keep sawing up and down and work your way gently backwards. So keep the blade moving. Again, if you try to pull it out just straight, it's not going to work so well. So keep your blade moving. And when you come back in, keep the blade moving. Now, one thing I say is you're sawing metal, not cutting bread. So the position of your saw frame is straight up and down. That means you've got the minimum amount of material, like the blade is having to cut through the minimum amount of material. Now I'm going to come out so that you're not watching, boring sanding for ages, sawing for ages. I'm going to start on this next one, which is the straight line, and show you just something a little bit different. So this time with all those movements, it's straight up and down. The only exception to that is you can change the direction with a straight line. So secure, I've done my upcuts. With a straight line, you pivot the blade, your saw frame, ever so slightly forward. You don't go full 90 degrees, it's only ever so slightly forward. What that does is it means that there's more blade in contact with the metal inside the cut, and it keeps it in a straight, it kind of encapsulates it a bit more firmly, which means it will stay straight a lot easier. As you can see,
that's a good tip, Catherine.
Sorry?
That's a good tip.
Yeah. I'm going to get up to a corner here. And hopefully you'll see that this is a fairly straight cut line. Now, when I'm coming up to a curve or a corner, I need to get that blade back upright again. So straight up and down, because it won't turn a corner and it won't do curves when it's bent. So back to my straight up and down position. I've come up to a corner. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to saw in one spot. I'm not trying to move the blade further forward, I'm actually going to be sawing up and down in the one place, a bit like a sewing machine. So sewing machine, I'm spinning the metal on that one point, getting it to the next angle, and then I can start again. And because it's a straight line, I can angle it ever so slightly forward. Keep going until I get to that next cut line. Just before I get to the point, back to straight up and down, sawing on the spot, turning my metal as I saw. And then once I'm in the right angle and I'm on the line for the next beat, on I go to the next part. Now I'll back out again, so you're not watching boring sawing. Up and down and out. Now this next one is for if you want to cut from the inside of a piece. So you might be doing internal tab setting or something like that, where you need to cut the material from the inside. Bit of advice, if you've got a small piece of material, then do your internal cuts first. If you cut away the outside and then try to cut your internal pieces, you've got far less material to hold and it's much, much harder to cut. So start with your internals and then do your externals, so you've got more material. Now for this, you're going to need a drill bit that's just fractionally larger than your blade. I've got a little micromotor. So quick release, blade in, a little bit of lubricant on my bit. And I need to know where to put my hole. Now, actually, I'll draw this bigger so that you can see. So I've got a shape that I want to cut out. What I don't want to do is put my drill bit right on the line, because what inevitably happens is that. So I will then have this kind of bump into my design line, which I do not want. So your better position is going to be inside the line. And then when I'm cutting out, I will cut and blend that cut line out, so that as I cut round and I come back, I can then blend back in, rather than trying to do, a drill hole and trying to then saw out and then have to change corner, because again, that little spot there, because I'm cutting around in a tiny little circle on a corner, that will end up potentially with just a little bump. So if I want to avoid the cleanup and piling, more accurate cutting, blending your lines.
Another great tip. Well done.
Yeah, blending. Like doing your makeup, blend. All right.
I'll take your word for that one, Katherine.
Yeah. All right. So I've got my piece I do want to put, you know, just a little pilot, dent to make sure that, you know, my drill bit is not going to go, you know, crazy and cut into my material. So get my little point just inside my line. One little hit. And then I've got just a starter position so that my drill bit has got somewhere to catch and not like dance across the metal. So I've got my drill bit in, I've got my pilot. Now, you can, your bench peg is sacrificial. Now, some jewelers like to keep it pristine and not use that. That's fine. If that's the case, then grab, you know, your sacrificial drilling block. You know, that will solve the problem. Otherwise, just drill straight into your wooden bench peg and drill in. But you might be able to see it better on this. So drill in. A little bit of pressure, but gentle. Again, with drill bits, you let the drill do the work, just like you let the saw do the work. So I've now got this nice little hole that's inside my cut line. Now, of course, how do you get your blade in there? Because, you can't come from the outside. You have to undo your saw blade. So I undo the bottom screw. I have to insert my piece of metal onto that blade. But I don't want it to be kind of weighting the blade down, or otherwise I'm not going to get the right tension. Undo that bottom screw, lean in, try to avoid tensioning the wire, screw up, tighten that, release, and I should have a, oops. Oh, that's actually a bit low. Could you hear the difference there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not quite high enough. So that's a little bit too loose.
But would that bit of metal have an impact on that as well?
Yes, exactly. Trying to make sure that it's not going to tension or weight that blade. So I try to hold it so that it's not kind of touching. No, I still don't like that. Let's do it again. I'm now going to bring that right up to the top, where there's going to have the least amount of resistance. That's better. Yeah, you can hear that. That's a bit better. All right.
Musical saw.
Yeah, musical saws. Right. So, like I said before, blend, blend, blend. I'm looking to create the nicest line to be able to touch in on that design line, but not create any corners. Now, one of the great things about starting from the inside is you've already created a little groove for it to catch in. The hole is actually a nice, kind of catch. So it's usually very easy to start sawing from the inside. So gentle grip, nice, firm and secure, with the most amount of metal touching the bench peg. And I'm kind of curving the piece in the same kind of direction as what the design line is. And I've now hit the line. So that's a good 4 mil probably before I've hit the line, and I'm at the same kind of same kind of angle. So long strokes. What you don't want to do is do this, where you're only using 3 centimeters or 2 centimeters or 1 centimeter of your blade. What will end up happening is that little bit will heat up, and that's where it'll break. So nice long strokes with this kind of gentle soaring sound. It shouldn't be hard on the ears or anything like that.
Because, Katherine, you pay for all of the blades, so you may as well use as much of it as you can. Eh?
Exactly. You know, don't waste your, especially if you're getting, you know, high quality, good blades. Yeah, I was gifted a bunch of 2.0s. I'm pretty sure they were made in India or somewhere. And I will use one for a project, chuck it. Get another one out, because they just blunt so quickly. They were a gift, cost me nothing. I could afford to go through them quickly. But yeah, now I'm not going to follow this line so that you can just see me blend. Otherwise I'll be here for ages. I'm going to cut this out quicker so that you can see how this falls out. So I've got quite a tight corner there, but as you can see, just with the nice long strokes, I can cut through that fairly quickly. And this is, yeah, probably 1.2 or 1.5 mil thick. So this is actually fairly thick material, but it is aluminium. So aluminium is a metal that's quite easy to cut through. It's a nice soft metal. However, clean up after your aluminium. Don't let your don't let the shavings from this contaminate other work if you're working in silver or gold. You don't want aluminium anywhere near your other metals. Okay, so I'm back to the beginning, and I'm going to be cutting that and blending into that original line. And there we go. That little piece comes out, and hopefully there's hardly a kind of noticeable mark or edge where you started and stopped. So yeah.
You're going to hold it up close to the camera?
Yeah, I'm looking at it, peering closely, because my eyes are shocking. But let's see if I can get my scribe. So yeah, I started in at this point here. Oops. And it's nice and smooth.
A work of art.
Yeah. So definitely practicing your soaring is fantastic, because what it means, the less cleanup you have to do, the less filing, the less sanding. So the more accurate you are with your soaring, the less work you've got to do later on. So yeah, I find that if you can get your soaring nice and accurate, that's helpful. Now, one other little tip, let's see if I can get through this one quickly. Oh, let's tighten up again. It's not going to work if it's not tight. Is how you finish that last point. So what I might do is I might come off up to the top there, because that's closer. Again, you don't have to watch me you know. Actually, no, I won't, because I might use these pieces for our next episode on filing. Then you can see different files of work. So I'm using the whole blade, up and down, up and down. Nice, gentle. Yeah, gentle soaring sound. Now, the end of my piece, let me fold that out of the way. End of my piece is just there. Before I get to that piece, a great hint, again, to have a nice, clean finish cut is to actually cut into the wood of your bench peg. So when you're like, you know, a mil, half a mil away from the end, butt the piece right up against the wood and saw into the wood as well. Because what that does is it stops any burr from happening on the edge of the material, and it just gives this nice, clean cut line. Again, less cleanup and less likelihood of that kind of snapping off instead of being cut off. So yeah, one other little tip for that one.
Yeah, this episode is packed full of little tips like that, Katherine.
Excellent, excellent. Glad to hear it. All right.
All from the voice of experience. I mean, people would learn these themselves over time, but you're saving them a lot of time in the future.
Oh, I hope so. Yeah. There are so many things that you know, wonderful experienced jewelers have taught me over the years, and it's like, oh, I wish I'd have known that right from the start. That would have saved me a lot of time and effort and energy. Now, what else have we got? Now, one of the most important things, your body position. So when you are, as I said, you want, this is about the height that you want your work, your bench peg to soar. But you also want to make sure that you're nice and straight, that your body, your back, you know, like your mum used to say, sit up straight, sit up straight. I'll be my mum. Sit up straight so that you've got, you know, your back is nice and straight. But this position also means that it keeps kind of like your shoulder and your elbows at 90 degrees. You know, rather than, if you're too far down, you're going to be hunched and benched, you know, hunched over your work. If you're too, if you're too high, then you're really kind of bending over into it. So too short, you can't see your work. Too high, benched over. But I also recognise people like me who are as blind as a bat. Being able to sit up straight and still see your work accurately, that's when you might be investing in you know, some magnifying glasses or something like that, so you can see your work well and easily. And also protect your eyes. So for me, I can, you know, I've always got my glasses on, so, you know, usually my eyes are kind of protected enough for something like this. But if you've got smaller glasses or whatever, you can get your safety glasses to go over the top, so that you're not getting, you know, bits of metal in your eye. Not pleasant.
Katherine, can I interrupt? A lot of people find soaring very therapeutic. What's your attitude to soaring?
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got everything set up so that it's going to be a smooth process, you know, the right size blade, it's tensioned correctly, you've got your pattern out, it is just this nice meditative, smooth, you get in the flow. Like, you really do just zone out, off you go. It really is it can be a really lovely movement of the body. I think it sometimes takes a little time to get there, so that you've got that nice rhythm, the gentle hand pressure, so it becomes a relaxing thing rather than a, yeah.
Yes, indeed. So we have a comment from Dawn, and she also loves soaring. So thanks for sharing that, Dawn.
Yeah, no, soaring is great. And certainly if you can get practiced at it, it becomes easy, becomes meditative, but it also means it becomes efficient because you're not having to do lots of cleanup afterwards because you're becoming more and more accurate. I've got some troubleshooting for people if they want to, you know, kind of why are my blades breaking kind of thing. The one of your big things would be that you've got too tight a grip. So that death grip is not helpful, and you're pushing too hard. So you're actually kind of putting too much of an angle. Instead of your blade being able to go up and down, it's kind of like this, and your metal's there, and you're kind of forcing it to distort. It's going to snap and break. If you twist the blade in the metal, so, you know, if your blade, you know, you're sawing up and down, and you then go and turn it in the blade, that will snap it. So always keeping your blade perpendicular to the metal. The tension's too tight or too loose. Too tight, it's too brittle, it heats up too quickly, snaps. Too loose, and it's just flopping all over the place and isn't able to move, again, breakage. If you are only using that tiny little bit of the blade, so again, all your heat is on, you know, 1 or 2 centimeters, it'll heat up, snap quicker, and wear away quicker. If you have not, sometimes just having that lubrication, so it's going through nice and smoothly. So lubricant is your friend. Your poor quality blades. Yeah, I noticed that if I'm at Jam Factory and using the blades that they provide for the students, I can go days without changing a blade. They are great. But yeah, kind of the cheap Indian ones from home, more likely to snap those because they're just poorer quality. So yeah, invest in your good blades. The wrong size for your material thickness. So that 2.0, that's probably at the smaller end of what you want for something that's 1.2, 1.5 mil thick. You know, going a little bit bigger, so a 0 or maybe even a 1 would be fine for 1.2, 1.5 mil. So learning which blade size works with which material, yeah, that's a big thing. And your other thing would be if your material is not secure and it's flapping around all over on the side, the more movement there is in this, the more likely you are to break a blade. And if your sawing is untidy, hate to say it, but practice, practice, practice. That is realistically the most important thing. It takes time to get accurate with sawing. However, that tip about the very fine line, that helps enormously in my experience, you know, that you've only got a tiny little thing to follow, not something that's big and wide and you've got a choice of where your blade could be. No, if it's nice and fine, that's what I'm following. So, but still practice. Yeah. If you can get hold of scrap copper or aluminium or anything like that, just draw little patterns, have a play, cut off little strips. You know, if you want to do something with them, you know, make them about 6.5, 7 mil, 70 mil long, 65, 70 mil long, cut off strips of different shapes, bend them around and make an easy, cheap ring. you know, just for practice. Then you get to practice your soldering. Yeah, but practice, practice, practice.
So, Katherine, what are the materials that you enjoy cutting?
Aluminium is like cutting through butter. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
But it is, like, some people call it a dirty metal. And absolutely, if you're going to be working with aluminium, another little hint, collect your lemel or your scraps. I have this great tray. Somebody gave this to me, and I have because my bench is like, I don't have a skirt, I've got a tray, you know, to catch my work. So if I am sawing, I'll have this little tray, and that means if I'm working in a more precious material, or something that I can you know, melt down for casting, like copper or silver, catch it all in here and divide it up into little bags or containers or whatever. If you're working in precious materials, absolutely figure out some system of catching your metals, especially if you can refine your metals at home. If you can do that, awesome. I've seen, like, trade jewelers, they actually have a different tray for every single metal that they own. And that tray, then there's no cross-contamination. You know, their 18-carat yellow gold can't get muddled up with their 9-carat white gold.
Mm.
You just have a way of making sure that they collect their materials and it's all segregated. So they either refine it themselves or they send it off to a refiner, to get it, resorted. But do not mix up your aluminium with anything else. Get rid of that. So after this, I'll be cleaning this thoroughly, and making sure that when I use it for the next, you know, if I use it for silver, I'll quite often use these to do like sand casting or something like that, so that, you know, you recycle, reuse, don't waste material. Yeah. Are there any
We've got a comment here from Tamara.
Hi, Tamara.
Tamara has said, this has been very useful for a beginner who has been hesitant to use the saw that has been in my drawer for a few months. Thank you. So Tamara's going to get on to her sawing today.
Excellent. That's what we like to hear.
And a comment also from Dawn. I bought some 10 by 10 centimetre sheets of brass and copper from AJS ages ago to practice with. I still have some, so when I get the urge to saw, I grab one and go.
Yeah. And sometimes, like, because my practice involves so many different materials and techniques and things like that, sometimes it's a little while between the times that I will saw. You know, in other things I might be using a laser cutter for something, or I'm just doing different techniques. I don't know if you guys have heard of the concept of getting your eye in. Like, when people who do calligraphy, they will go from one font to another and they have to get their eye in. So they'll have their scrap paper. They've been doing, you know, I don't know, some fluid, florally, fancy copperplate handwriting, and then they go to like German, angular, and they have to change how they work. So they'll have their scrap paper and they will, you know, fill up a page to get their eye back in. Sometimes it's like that with sawing, that if you have not done it in a couple of months, grab that little piece of scrap, draw a line, get your eye back in, then move on to your good piece. So that, you know that your mind, your body is in that right space, you know, and your muscle memory's kicked back in. It's not freaking out the first time. So sometimes getting your eye back in just with a piece of scrap, go for it. Yeah.
Excellent.
And if you can take your metal, if you can't reuse it yourself, get it back to a refiner's so that they can, reuse it, melt it back down, and provide the wider jeweller community with recycled metals rather than, new stuff out of the ground. Yeah.
Indeed. Katherine, thank you so much for today's presentation. I'm sure the viewers have got a lot out of it. Thanks to Dawn and Tamara for being involved, and others. And Katherine, we'll look forward to seeing you again sometime real soon.
That sounds awesome. Yes, join us for another Back to Basics in a little while. We'll move on to things like filing and sanding, things like that, so that you kind of know those basic skills.
And we've got a last minute question from Dawn. Do refiners take brass and copper?
You've got to find the right ones. I know in South Australia, Jam Factory does have refiners that they can take stainless steel, mild steel, aluminium, all the metals can go. But they might have like limits on, like you might have to have 5 kilos or something of metal. So I'm not sure. You'd have to check your local refiners. For me, I end up with tiny little bits of scrap. For me, I can recast my copper and my silver into sand casting type stuff. So I've never had to use refiners because I somehow use it up. But yeah, if you're going through a lot, and certainly if you're doing, gold and stuff, places like Palos or Beck's, they'll do your precious metals. But yeah, copper and brass will most likely be more of an industrial refiner.
No worries. Okay, that's no problem at all, Katherine. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you for your questions, guys. Yep. And if you do have any more, stick them in the chat and I can, come back in an hour or so and answer questions.
No worries. Okay. Thank you so much, Katherine. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Peter. And thank you for everybody for joining us. See you later.